Now, to give you the credibility, it was in the summer of 1992. As was mentioned by Jonathan, I'm a broadcaster on WABC Radio New York, which is the #1 news talk station in the nation. And on every day when John Gotti Sr. was on trial, I would critique what had transpired the day before. And I would speak truth and give knowledge to people about exactly what organized crime was doing, exactly what the Gottis and Gambinos were doing. So in April of 1992, John Gotti Sr. summons his son, John Gotti Jr., and says, "Silence Curtis Sliwa." So a bunch of these knuckle draggers beat me with baseball bats 32 times, broke my elbow, broke my wrist, broke the back of my head, and figured I would learn the code of Omerta. I would wise up. Well, after getting out of the ER, lickety-split, I just ratcheted it up. Came back the next day on the microphone, and it was twice as much talk about what organized crime was. A lot of people were saying, "You're insane in the brain. What, are you out of your mind? You got all the furniture upstairs rearranged in the wrong rooms." Well, when you get hit by a baseball bat as many times as I did, and you can actually see the Joe DiMaggio autograph on the Louisville Slugger, well, maybe they did rearrange some of that furniture. And it wasn't because of my great martial arts expertise. Yeah, I put on some moves. I avoided becoming room temperature, but it's the guy upstairs who kept me alive. Hashem, JC, whoever it is, the God that you believe in, clearly somebody was looking out, covering my back. But in June of 1992, John Gotti Sr. was sentenced to triple life without parole, and he had a final request of his son. He summoned him there for a final sit-down, and he says, "Son, I want you to shut this guy up permanently." And so the plot and my fate was sealed. They stole a yellow cab. They knew I took a yellow cab to the radio station each morning. They sawed the handles off in the chop shop. They had a gunman stuffed underneath the dashboard. They knew eventually I would pick and queue up for that yellow cab. And on June 19th of 1992, guess what? Bingo, lotto for them, I got in that cab. Said, "Take me to Madison Square Garden. That's where we broadcast from." Cab driver said, "No problem, Mac." And I started reading the sports pages because it's quite cathartic, because when you go through current events, as you know, it sours your stomach. And about halfway through on the ride, he goes right instead of going left. I said, "Hey, Mac, turn this hack around. Are you out of your mind? You're going the wrong way." And guess what? Jack in the Box came up. He had a .38, and he starts firing. 5 shots later, 5 hollow point bullets in my lower extremities. And with the last ounce of energy I had, I was able to jump out the window of a moving cab and avoid being hit by oncoming traffic. And I guess they assumed I'd be dead on arrival. I survived, just barely. 12 years later, 3 federal trial. John Gotti Jr. escapes prosecution because of statute of limitation. And the Gabon, the Jadrul, who shot me 5 times, he gets 20 years. This idiot is doing 20 years. For John Gotti Jr., who's home on the Ponderosa, raising his kids, and obviously whining, dining, and pocket lining with other mobsters choking on their lobsters. I tell that story because it explains to you that we all have to be on a mission. And the mission has to be, we have to undercut this romanticized image of crime. I see blacks and Hispanics idolizing the Gottis and Gambinos, who say the worst imaginable things about blacks and Hispanics. They might as well be members of the Ku Klux Klan, hanging blacks and Hispanics from the highest yardarms. And yet, a group would call itself the Mexican Mafia after an organization like this that brought heroin into the inner city neighborhoods and poisoned so many families and killed so many people. What are you, out of your minds? What are you, self-destructive, self-haters? It's the last thing in the world you want to call yourself. And I'm not telling you something you don't already know. And don't ever believe that the old Dons weren't interested in bringing heroin into the inner city because they wanted to give it to the blacks and the Hispanics, and then eventually their own kids started feeding off of it because they have no self-worth, no self-pride, no self-esteem, no sense of being a part of something other than number one, second to none. I'm the best, not like the rest. So, when I was a night manager at McDonald's in the late 70s and the Bronx was burning all around me, I didn't take this attitude of, oh, it's the police, it's the mayor, it's their responsibility. Because everyone can play the blame game. I just said, wait a second, I'm a single male. I didn't have a family at that time. I have time, I have energy. Why am I moaning and groaning about what should be done when in fact these are the sons and daughters of the residents of this community who are slinging the drugs, who are sticking people up, who are doing push-in robberies, who are joining gangs, forming gangs? Why don't we create the alternative? And I brainwashed 13 of my closest who worked for me at Mickey D's. They really didn't have much of a choice. And we started patrolling the Muggers Express, the number 4 train, on the way back to Brooklyn in the wee hours of the morning. And that's how this started. And then eventually it evolved into the many cities and countries that we operate in now. And it's structured. There's a training program. There's a discipline. There's leadership. But you know something? When you cut right down to the marrow of the bone, there's not much difference between the Guardian Angels and a gang. The way leadership is, the way structure is. We're out in the streets, they're out in the streets. Many of us come from the streets, many of them come from the streets. But there's a different energy. And let me finish on this note, because what we do in the streets is different than most, because when you are trying to deal with a gang problem or a growing gang menace or the beginnings of a gang problem in the streets, in the neighborhoods, and the schools, what you want to do is be able to understand, who are these gang members? Are they all hardcore? Are they all a menace to society? And the answer is no. In my experiences around the country and around the world, there's 3 levels of gangs. It's like rings of a tree. On the periphery are the wannabes and the posers. These are the guys and some gals who are there to style and profile. When things are going good, they're smoking spliffs, they're drinking 40s, they're talking smack, they're chasing skirts, they're getting into fights. They have huge senses of testosterone crashing through their cranium. But when all of a sudden the drive-bys take place, they're out of sight, out of mind. They're mama looks, they're mama boys. When the cops are serving warrants and kicking in doors at 4 in the morning, all of a sudden they're staying with their auntie, or they're going south of the border, or they're in another part unknown, and they're knocked down by law. And that's the mass majority of these guys, because they haven't been in that long. And the second level are the prospects. These are the young men and women who are being given homework assignments, and although they may not have done that well in school, they may be dropouts, didn't even get their GED, they want to prove that they have street credibility, that they can keep it real, and they follow through on those assignments. They earn their stripes. And then the core, the epicenter of the gang, which keeps it thriving, growing, and developing, are the men and women who buy in to the ideology. They eat it, breathe it, sleep it, 24/7, 365. Some are second, third generation. So they actually help perpetuate the legacy. Our job is, when we're out in the streets, we're going to cherry pick. We're going to go after the posters and the wannabes. We know that a lot of these young men and women hang out with the gangs for a variety of reasons. Because you have to, for protection, because they want to feel empowered, because all of a sudden they feel like they need to be part of a surrogate family. Whatever the motivation and reasons, we feel that if given the opportunity of joining something righteous where you protect people instead of preying on people, some, not all, some young men and women will cross that line. And then they need a group that's going to constantly keep reinforcing it, because it's hard to do in the neighborhood and definitely in a dysfunctional house. The way to deal with a gang problem? Any number of ways. I don't have the answer. I don't have the panacea. You can deal with it from a law enforcement approach. You can deal with it from a police approach. You can deal with it from a corrections department approach. You can deal with it through intervention, through gang crisis, sit-downs and negotiations and attempts to get peace. Or you can deal with it, as the Guardian Angels do, by being out in the streets, a visual deterrent, being positive role models to young ones, not carrying weapons, proving that you don't have to be macho simply based on the power or the lethal nature of the weapon that you're having. And most importantly, out there encouraging men and women and young adults to give information, to break this paralysis that is strangling neighborhoods when they perpetuate the fact of snitches get stitches and end up in ditches. A lot of young men and women will talk to Guardian Angels. They'll give us information. We can back channel it to the investigators, to the police. They don't have to put their fingerprints on it. They can remain anonymous. You need a third force out into the streets that is independent and autonomous of the police. So in coming to San Jose tonight, I hope that some of you will keep in mind that this is a potential option to add to your wardrobe, to what the government is already doing, to what the faith-based organizations are already doing, to what you have in your own minds as to what should be doing. But I will tell you this much. The Guardian Angels is not going to cost you a nickel, dime, and penny. And I know already in San Jose, they're $1 short and they're a day late. They don't have enough resources. They may not be able to hire enough police. May not be able to hire enough social workers. May not be able to even make their budgetary limitations that are already far behind. So we don't come with our beret in hand and ask for any money. This is all sweat equity. We will find the volunteers from within the streets. We will get young men and women and adults to join voluntarily. We will communicate and cooperate with all existing organizations and obviously with the police and elected officials. Because we want people to dare to care. We want them to improve, not to move. We want them to think us and we. And most importantly, we want them to be protectors, not predators, and role models for this generation and a future generation. Thank you very much.